Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week, we've got Matthew Wells from the great state of Texas, as well as the full MMA Junkie radio team with Gorgeous George and Goes. So, guys, let's not waste any time and just get right to it. Listen, it was a light schedule over the holiday weekend in MMA for sure, but the biggest names in action were all over Triller's new Triad Combat concept, which featured the likes of Frank Mir, Matt Mitrione, Mike Perry, Derek Campos, Albert Tumanov, some significant names. MMA legend Quentin Rampage Jackson was there. And look, he says he believes Triad Combat can be a force in the industry. But what was your take? Does Triller have a hit on its hands here? What feedback would you give them is how to make it better or how they can build on this? Matt, you got to see it all up close and personal. So why don't you get it started? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, absolutely, man. There were quite a few takes I have coming out of this event. I mean, it was interesting, I think, all in all, considering the slow week that it was in the combat sports space for us, in particular with no MMA really going on. But I'm not totally sure how the event came off on television, but for me, inside the arena, it came off pretty well. Like, it was entertaining. Obviously, like, they had, Metallica musical acts mixed in, and the fans seemed to love that. The turnout was pretty good. I think, considering what it was, especially an event like this where there was, new rules being in place. I think there's a lot of things that they can improve on, though. Some of the stuff was a little bit forced, like at the very beginning of the show when Rampage and Shannon Briggs did their little scuffle with Nick Cannon in the middle, like that kind of thing. And then when Ryan Kavanaugh cut a whole promo on Dana White, putting up his IG invitation and everything like that on the screens inside the arena, like it felt a little forced, a little bit, over the top there. But the fights themselves were good, I think, for the most part. But the question about like the longevity of this, like how long can this thing kind of go on? It's all going to come down to how many times are you going to be able to create a main event that's really intriguing? Like this one was really kind of questionable in itself. But besides that, let's look at some other things. Like production wise, there was a couple of snafus throughout the event. Like for us in the arena, like we couldn't tell what round it was or what time it was until like the third or fourth fight. Like they didn't have that information available. I think they had it all together by the time like the co-main and main event got together. We could finally see the actual timer and the rounds and everything. There were a couple other things, like we couldn't hear the bells from time to time, like to signal the start or end of the rounds. Even with like the fighters themselves, like they had some confusion with the rules at times. Like Matt Mitrione literally stopped fighting to argue with the ref about one of the rules with the clinching. So there's a bunch of stuff to iron out, and I think they can get it better. It's just something to work on, to build on. It was a good starting point, I think. For us in the media, for example, it was kind of hectic back there. And I know this is something more similar to the boxing world where interviews are quick and fast. Like you just gotta kind of get them where you can. Like there's no real structure to it, like on the UFC side of things. So there's a lot of differences there. But, like I said, all in all, I think it was a pretty fun event for what it was. I'm interested to see where they go from here. If they can get Rampage versus Briggs as their next main event, cool. I think that'll get some intrigue. Just depends on what musical act they can bring in to fill the arena like they did with Metallica here.
Yeah, solid feedback all the way around there. A lot of things that they can tighten up. I will say, from a viewing perspective, I enjoyed it. I was just watching. I thought it was fun. George, what do you think? Is this a concept that can stick around?
It can. A couple times a year, I think people will be into it, and a lot of it will have to do with the matchmaking. I really enjoyed Paul versus Askren. There was some sort of a build-up. Usually all that is around a beef of some sort. So I would rather have, that type of a matchup. But them going MMA versus boxing, it's interesting, but only for hardcores. Then bringing on Metallica, I don't know. The people that are wanting to buy a pay-per-view at the last minute and get entertained, I don't think that's what puts them over the edge. Center it all around the combat sport and what you're doing there. Same thing with the triangular ring. No, man, like I said, don't overthink it. Don't reinvent the wheel. I like that they have pretty good production. They really, really feature the fighters. And like I said, they've had some interesting matchups. It doesn't always have to be beef. You can have legend versus legend, like with Belfort and Holyfield or whatever. But I think it all comes down to the matchmaking and making intriguing fights that people want to purchase and see. All the little bells and whistles. You maybe do that the first couple shows and work it out, but I think they're now on their 10th show and they're a couple years in. Get it together, tighten things up.
Yeah, overall, listen, I thought it was entertaining. The concept of the sport itself, the mixed rules, I was okay with it. I thought it was kind of fun. I just think the big question, right, is going to be profitability. Like, I mean, are those shows actually making money? If not, how long they can sustain them? Because as you said, the production was over the top. Metallica had to cost money. That's for them to worry about, I guess, not the fans. But I am just kind of curious as to how long they can keep it around. So we'll see how it goes. Well, look, since Triad Combat isn't really MMA or boxing, the result really doesn't go anywhere on anyone's record. So that's kind of an intriguing part about it. But I'm going to ask you this, positive or negative, whose combat sports career was impacted the most by their performance on Saturday night? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock again. George, get us started.
I believe Mike Perry's was impacted the most, and I'm thinking more like as being, I guess, if I was part of Team Perry, not that I guess his win really sends shockwaves throughout the combat sports world, but this is a guy that lost 4 of 5, exiting MMA, and he was beloved in the UFC by UFC fans. Win or lose, they rode with that guy, because he kind of had a little bit of that it factor, and so. He's now with Triller and BKFC, and I think a lot of us feel like that's probably his home, and that's probably where he can flourish. And so far, he's got 1 win, so good on that, build on that. But then on the personal side, with him now being married and having a kid, you can tell that possibly he's maybe losing that thuggish side to him and becoming just more of a human being. And so that's good if you're someone that's around him, supports him, and loves him. And so I think this win, like I say, can maybe put some money in his account and get him feeling good about his combat sports career and maybe good as a person. Because as much as people liked him and he had that it factor, I mean, he had a lot of controversies coming from the cornerman who had some racist comments, I think, in his first fight towards the, he had a domestic problems and then some problem at a restaurant in Texas with an older gentleman. So he really, really needed to clean things up, and I think he's going to go a long way with just this win as far as positives.
Yeah, certainly a big win for him, and to kind of get off the slide. And look, this a spectacle seems like a place that Mike Perry can thrive. So we'll see. Goes, how about you? Who's impacted the most?
I think for me, the answer is Frank Mir. Frank Mir's career has been incredible, guys, in the sense that he's achieved some of the highest feats you can in the sport, and he's continuously found ways to reinvent himself. But at his age and with the wear and tear on his body, you never know which fight's going to be your last one. You really have to take care of your body. This was a heavy loss, and it could have been a lot worse, okay? I think Frank needs some time off, and I think he needs to sit down with his team, with his family, and start formulating that exit plan. I'm not saying end it right now, but you have to have some kind of exit plan here for this career. You have to remember, aside from all the wear and tear that he's gotten in mixed martial arts, this guy went through a horrible motorcycle accident, back in the day, and his body had to recover from that. He's done great work as an analyst. I'd love to see him come back and do some of that work. When he first did that, we all knew him kind of as a submission guy, and since then he's immersed himself in boxing. I mean, if he was that good back then, can you imagine some of the feedback he'd be giving us today? So even if he has the itch to still compete, there's submission underground. You could do some of that stuff, maybe some high-level coaching. But as far as Saturday night goes, I think it was toughest on him.
Listen, that's fair. I mean, this is a tough game. As much praise as we gave him after his first boxing match, then you see something like that, and it makes you get a little bit scared, right? And you worry about a guy that we've all been fans of for a long time, for sure. Matt, how about you? Who stood out for you?
I'll give you two fighters really quickly. One for me, first and foremost, is Albert Tumanov, a guy who's been in the UFC, fought against top welterweights like Leon Edwards, Gunnar Nelson. Since leaving the UFC, he's on a 5-fight win streak, and he went out there. Like you said, the boxer versus the MMA concept that was Triad Combat. He looked like the professional boxer against Scott Sigmund and absolutely just pieced him up. Looked very, very technical and very clean. And then, of course, made that plea to Dana White with me in our interview after the fact, got people riled up. So we want to see him return to the UFC. And I think that was the type of fight to make it happen. It was a big moment for him. Now, for another one, if Triller Triad is going to be a thing that sticks around and they do actually fulfill their promise that they're saying that they're going to build people up off of this, you got to look no further than Alexa Culp, who went out there, got the fastest knockout of the night in 46 seconds, did so, looked amazing. She's got the personality to boot as well. So if Triad Combat is going to be a thing that gets built up, hey, only woman on the card that fought and won. There you go. Look no further than her. So yeah, two people for you right there.
Yeah, good shouts. Culp looks like she could be a star. And Tumanov, what are we doing, UFC? Let's get this man back in the. I wanted him back in the UFC before. I don't even know why he left. We definitely need him back after that performance. So that could be a career-changing moment for him. We'll have to see. But guys, we get back to more traditional action this week, including Bellator 272 on Friday night. And the main event is absolutely fantastic with new champ Sergio Pettis looking for the first defense of his title when he faces the former champ who never lost the belt, but rather vacated it due to injury, Kyoji Horiguchi. Now, there's been some discussion about who is the true champion in the division, with Pettis even saying he wants to win to legitimize his title. So with the stakes so high, who do you think has the most on the line in this fight on Friday night? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Get it started.
I believe it's Sergio Pettis. I think he has way more to lose here, guys. Look, his name carries a lot of value and a lot of hype right now. The way his brother performed at PFL, it didn't really work out. And I think since then, the names have just kind of switched. Sergio's the one that's carrying all that hype. He's carrying the torch right now for the Pettis name. So say what you will about how the belt arrived there. It's around his waist, and he earned it. You can't take that away from him. There's prestige. There's dollar signs around it that come with that for your brand, being a champion, your legacy. There's a lot on the line. And listen, I understand the Horiguchi argument. I get it. But he lost since then. You know, he lost over in Ryzen. I could see if maybe he continued to win and stayed undefeated, then you would feel like, yeah, he's still kind of carrying that championship swag with him. But I feel like that went away with that loss. So, you know, he's one of the faces of Bellator right now. He has to defend that. And he's won 4 straight. He's looked impressive. So I think he's the guy that has way more to lose in this fight.
Can definitely see that, right? It seems like he's, like you said, becoming a face of the company. Then you could come in and have it all taken away from you in just one night, right? So, Matt, what do you think? Is Pettis the right choice here, or look, Kyoji's trying to reestablish himself? Is he the one whose legacy has a little bit more on the line here?
No, I think it's still Sergio, man, because you know, he even said himself that he doesn't really truly feel like the champion until he gets the job done here. And I think there's a little bit of truth in that, especially when you consider that he's coming in as an underdog, as a champion as well. So not only do you have more to lose in a literal sense that you actually have the title right now, a lot of people are expecting you to not win this fight, and that's just added pressure. So I think he has to go out there and really capture this opportunity to not only prove a lot of people wrong, but really solidify his position as that top guy in Bellator. So there's a lot for him on the line here. I mean, if he doesn't get it done, then people are just going to be like, see, it was Kyoji all along, you know, even despite those losses that goes mentioned. So it's just one of those things, man. There's a lot for Pettis to really grab here. And if he gets it done, it'll be easily the biggest moment in his career.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in because, like you guys said, right, the belt is around his waist. I mean, you don't have to legitimize that. It's there, right? But there's always going to be doubters. There's always going to be a little bit of an asterisk. If you don't beat that guy, then people say, well, did the title reign ever even matter to begin with? So definitely, as you said, a lot on the line there for Sergio Pettis. I know he's excited about the opportunity, but a lot on the line. George, what about you? Is it a clean sweep for Pettis, or are we maybe missing something with Kyoji?
No, it's not a clean sweep. Horiguchi, man, and I'll tell you why. It's a whole different take. It's not like Horiguchi is at risk of losing his contract or his status, or he's got to shake off a losing streak, any of that stuff. That guy is awesome. There's just no way around it. But in my opinion, arguably and quietly, I think he's just the best MMA fighter to ever come out of Japan. This guy's a former Shudo champion. He's a former Ryzen Grand Prix and Undisputed champion and Bellator champion. He's got almost 30 wins, only 3 losses, so he wins 90% of the time. And even in the UFC, he had a 7-1 run, only losing to one Demetrius Johnson. So all respect to the Gomis, the Aokis, the Nakamuras, the Sakurabas of the world, Tamura. But I'm telling you, man, this guy is really, really the best fighter I've ever seen come out of Japan. And if he can continue to add to that legacy by coming back and grabbing the title that was once his, maybe some title defenses, you know, Bellator doesn't have a flyweight title, but maybe you could ask Scott Coker to open one, and maybe he can go the champ route there. I don't know, man, but this guy has really been pretty special. He knows some English. I just think he can be that next level that we've always been looking for out of this country that's traditional and so rich in martial arts history. So I think Horiguchi, it's that guy.
Man, it's such a phenomenal fight. I'm so excited for it. But I do kind of see that with Horiguchi as well. I mean, I just feel like this is the moment where if he loses this fight, he never gets that respect that I think those in the hardcore community have felt that he deserves, and maybe the casuals haven't had a chance to see yet. And I feel like, man, if he comes up short here, maybe he never really gets that respect. So it's a great one, man. That's a fantastic main event for Bellator for sure. But guys, meanwhile, at UFC on ESPN 31, we've got another incredible main event at 135 pounds as well, with Jose Aldo versus Rob Font. Now, it feels like a little bit of a crossroads fight for Aldo in some ways, although somehow I think he's only like 9 months older than Font, which just seems absolutely impossible. Now, we know Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan are set to unify the belts early next year. And of course, we got TJ Dillashaw on the mend right now, and he thinks he needs to jump in and fight for a title when he's healthy. But what's on the line here in this fight? I mean, it's a big one, but is it a number one contender fight, or does it maybe depend on who wins, whether or not they get a number one contender fight after this? What are we actually fighting for here? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, lay it out.
Yeah, for me, this one's kind of tough, man, because we're looking at number 4 and number 5 in the official UFC rankings facing each other. And this feels like it's a big fight for the division. I think this is going to set up a number one contender fight. We have TJ Dillashaw out there healing up. Hopefully he's able to return in first quarter 2022. If so, I would like to see the winner of this fight face him. Preferably, that fight takes place the same card or the week before or the week after the next title fight between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan, that unification bout. The winner of that, I mean, obviously, between Font and Aldo, I think they don't have much else to prove. So it's either one more fight for a title, or if something crazy happens, the winner could find themselves backdooring themselves into a title fight directly, like if there's another injury or something like that. So the winner of this fight, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Who knows what'll happen?
TJ Dillashaw is just throwing stuff at his computer screen right now. He's like, I'm not fighting again, man. I deserve that time. But I like your plan there. I like the idea of having a number one contender fight and doing it on the same card, maybe the backup situation. I mean, the vibes around Sterling and Yan are always a little bit weird. You got to think something weird might happen moving forward. So we'll see. But George, what do you think? Is it that simple? The winner here go fights Dillashaw in a number one contender fight, or are there more scenarios of how this could play out?
I think Rob Font is the one that needs to sweat things the most, because he's up against two legends that get thrown into title fights quite often. And look, they've earned their spot, man. Dillashaw, one of the greatest bantamweights ever. Jose Aldo, one of the greatest featherweights ever. Now competing, very nicely at the bantamweight level. However, there's like this bar that's been set, or a litmus test, whatever you want to call it. When Peter Yan fought Jose Aldo, he finished them in the later rounds. I think if Font can do something early and make a statement, and then grab that mic, promote why he should be next, he may be able to bump TJ Dillashaw and Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo through the fight, and TJ Dillashaw just by promoting himself and getting himself, to solidify as the number one guy, because Dillashaw is still going to have some questions about that injury. When can he come back? When he'll be ready to go? So, like Matt said, stay ready, be ready. But when you have that opportunity, make the most of it, because he's actually like the last choice probably for the UFC in terms of how things can shake out and getting promoted into a title fight, because the UFC is all about making, selling pay-per-views.
Yeah, that's a great point. This is a big opportunity for him to kind of break out and solidify himself with maybe those that don't see it that way. Goes, I'll ask you, I mean, I kind of said it feels like a crossroads fight for Aldo. I mean, is there more on the line than just title ranking right here with a guy like Aldo at this point in his career?
Whenever you have a fighter who is so beloved like Jose Aldo, he's never too far from a title shot. A win here would be 3 straight, and those are wins over established veterans, but guys more on the younger side, where you could say it's not like he's putting out these older guys. These are guys a little bit more on the younger side. So I would say the factor that I think could maybe speed up this process would be if travel comes back as an option, because selling Jose Aldo with a win here in front of a Brazilian crowd, going for another title shot, that can be done. But with travel still on a lockdown, I feel like an opening for Jose Aldo is just a little bit smaller. I kind of agree with the guys. If Rob Font can come in here and ice a former champion, he'd have wins over the current Bellator champion and Sergio Pettis, a win over the World Series of Fighting champion and Marlon Moraes, and a win over Cody Garbrandt, a former UFC champ. How do you deny him?
Man, that's a great point. Boy, I hadn't really thought about travel, but, that really is an important thing to think about when you're laying out title scenarios, right? Like the UFC obviously likes to sell those hometown fighters in their country. They know they can pack the arena a little bit. I hadn't really put much stock into that, man, but that is an absolutely great point. It's a great fight. Stylistically, I think it's going to be a banger. Rob Font with a lot to prove. Jose Aldo out to prove that he's still the guy that he once was. So, man, we are gifted with some great matchups this weekend. Well, guys, Conor McGregor is a master of keeping his name in the headlines, and his latest statement is that he's going to return from a broken leg next year, and he's going to step right into a lightweight title shot, despite currently standing at 1-3 in his past 4 fights. So here's the question. Is he right? Is there a scenario in which this would make sense and it plays out exactly like Conor McGregor says it will? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock, George. Get us going.
Because he's the unicorn, there is a scenario. This would apply to anybody else in mixed martial arts, but Conor McGregor has the ability to sell that because the last fight was settled by an injury, they should run it back a 4th time to really, really break the 1-1 tie. Of course, most of us don't see it that way. Dustin Poirier was already performing well, and injuries are part of the game. Some kicks got checked along the way, and your body wasn't able to respond. I mean, I really want McGregor to come back and be 100% when he does. It's not like I'm trying to throw any shade, but he is 1-3. So really, other than the Dustin in his last 4 fights, other than Dustin Poirier winning, there's just no other angle. This is a division that's deep with contenders. But if Poirier can get past Oliveira, I think he'll have to either way dance with Justin Gaethje. Don't get me wrong, but at some point when Conor does come back, his first fight will be a title fight if Dustin Poirier is there waiting for him. Probably a year from his injury, so it would be sometime maybe in July of 2022. It's always possible with the Irishman.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing to point out, right, is that the rules don't apply to Conor McGregor. He's the biggest star in the history of the sport. So when you're making arguments about whether it could happen or whether it makes sense, you got to remember the star power that he brings with him. So, Goes, what do you think? I mean, is that the key? Is that Dustin has to win? Is there any other scenario than if it's that trilogy fight?
That would be tough, man. I mean, like you guys said, with Conor McGregor, there's always a scenario, but you'd be pissing on a lot of people's Cheerios. And if you're Dana White, you better start growing out a big mustache so you can twirl it as you're making the announcement, because it would be the most sinister thing I think you can do right now in the UFC and to that division. A division that has guys like Beneil Dariush, Islam Makhachev. They're having problems breaking through with a 7-fight win streak and a 9-fight win streak. You're going to look them in the eyes and you're going to tell them they're not good enough, that they don't put on interesting fights. Oliveira and Poirier has to play out. And if we all knew the result of that, we'd all be in line at the Mandalay Bay here in Las Vegas, but we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. I think if you're Dana White, what you got to do, come on, you're going to make money anyways. Put Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz together. Finish that trilogy. It's going to make a lot of money. Do it at Allegiant Stadium, a main event. Throw on another big name. Have your big stadium show. Make all your money. But, I mean, like we said earlier, guys, Conor McGregor is that unicorn, and he can throw a wrench in everyone's plans.
The devious and dastardly Dana White, huh? It would really upset some people in that division, that's for sure. But you're right. You know what's crazy? I do think the Nate Diaz fight is the fight to make right now. That's the one that's going to generate the money. And you're right. I think that could do Allegiant Stadium. So, Matt, what do you think? I mean, is this the fight that Conor needs to be looking for? I mean, does he need to be worried about Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, or does it need to be, Nate Diaz or bust? What's the play here?
I mean, the best thing for Conor is he's Conor and he has a world of options available, right? He doesn't necessarily need the title. And I think it would be incredibly disrespectful to give him a title shot, because look at it this way. Outside of Dustin Poirier, who he has lost 2 straight to, Conor McGregor has not faced anyone else in the top 15 of the UFC official rankings. That sounds crazy, but that's a fact. The only person that Conor has faced in the current top 15 is someone who he's down on again in the trilogy fights. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to, not call that the leg injury a loss per se, I'm okay with that, because it does leave a little sour taste in my mouth. We didn't get a definitive finish like we did in the rematch. But listen, at the end of the day, the guy is 1-3 since the Floyd Mayweather fight. So, title fight is just kind of crazy talk to me. And like you guys said, he's the unicorn. There's so many other intriguing fights out there that he can just headline a pay-per-view. You don't need a title attached to it. So let's go that route instead.
It just occurred to me is kind of wild, right? Like Dustin Poirier's already fought him 3 times. We say the only scenario is to make that fight again. I wonder if Dustin would even be open to it at this point, where if he says, I'm done with that guy, I've had enough of it, I want to move on. And then I start wondering, well, would Charles Oliveira be like, I'd like to cash in on some of that big Conor money. I don't care if he's 1-3 or not. Let's do it. So maybe it does play out the other way. We'll see. It's always interesting when Conor's involved. Obviously, the needle moves, the clicks are had, and yeah, he is a unicorn. So we'll see what happens when he's all healthy again. We look forward to seeing him fight one way or the other. Well, guys, it is a busy weekend. Like I said, UFC and Bellator both have fantastic cards lined up. We got some great fights top to bottom on those, some other organizations in action as well. We'll talk about everything that happens next week on Spinning Back Clique.